Good evening, my dear brothers and sisters. I am very, very happy to welcome all of you for our hypertension webinar series masterclass. Today is fifth webinar, and I'll share some slides. Yeah, we'll share the slides. Post is enabled for. Today, we have with us our eminent speaker, Dr. Chenniyappan, and panelist, Dr. Rajiv Gupta. He's a renowned cardiologist and who has done a lot of work on epidemiology of hypertension. He's from Jaipur. And these are the following programs which we will conduct in the future weeks. Tomorrow, of course, acute severe hypertension at 9 o'clock, difficult to control hypertension, hypertensive disorders in pregnancy, and in the hypertensive disorders in pregnancy, please invite a lot of obstetricians also to participate. Hypertensive trials which change the practice, conquering the silent killer. That's the last talk. Of course, Chenniyappan now needs no introduction. Rajshekhar also, our treasurer, needs no introduction. Now I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Rajiv Gupta. He's the MD, PhD, Community Medicine, Consultant Physician, Chairman, Medical Sciences, Preventive Cardiology, General Medicine Research, Eternal Hospital, Jaipur. Rich experience of 42 years in the field of medicine, pioneer in coronary heart disease, hypertension, epidemiology in India. Is the recipient of several awards, honors for his immense contributions like CSI, Dr. Basu Award, Chaturvedi Memorial Award, and then he has delivered Dr. S.N. Shah Oration Award. He has got more than 900 publications, including 600 original articles and 100 book chapters. The Altumas Sheikh is a consultant endocrinologist, diabetologist, and metabolic physician, Saifi Hospital, Mumbai. Okay, I just want to set the tone for Dr. Chenniyappan. Chenniyappan is going to talk about the management of hypertension. Of course, he will also mention about non-pharmacological intervention. I thought I will begin with the non-pharmacological intervention. This is the ACC. They say weight loss, DASH diet, dietary approach to stop hypertension, sodium reduction, potassium supplementation, and then increased physical activity. This is the effectiveness of lifestyle modification in lowering BP. If you see physical activity, it reduces 4 to 9. DASH eating plan, when you consume diet rich in fruits and vegetables, low fat. I always give the slide and I talk everywhere, but none of us, sometimes we don't follow. See, how many of us take 3 to 4 servings of vegetables and fruits in our daily life? So we must start practicing our DASH eating plan. And also physical activity. Some people say they don't have time to walk. I always tell them, don't use stairs. Don't use lift, go by stairs. When you go to temple, market, anywhere, you go by walk. And then dietary sodium restriction. We talk about sodium restriction everywhere, but in our own setup, when we buy processed food, we don't see the salt content. And I don't see anywhere there is any salt restricted counter. We have sugar-free counters in the marriage party and banquet. I have not seen salt restricted counter. Of course, moderate alcohol consumption, weight loss, stress reduction, tobacco cessation. Each one can reduce 8 to 14 millimeters of mercury in DASH eating plan, and in a dietary restriction 2 to 8 millimeters. And I always say this is lifestyle modification. In my style, I will say it is a lifestyle modification. You know why? Because in most of the houses, wives only takes major decisions, especially in the house. They are the home ministers and then they are the leaders. So what diet we take, they only sometimes decide. So if they know what diet to be given to the family, then it's good also. They also know how to restrict salt. And suppose the husbands and the children do not walk, they make everybody walk. And even if you don't walk, they'll give a dog and say, take the dog out for a walk. And stress reduction, they are the main people for stress reduction as well as stress production. Then Tobacco Association, of course, they'll control husbands from alcohol and smoking. So that is why I call them, instead of lifestyle modification, I used to call them as lifestyle modification, because if that lady from a house knows that, the whole house will be very healthy. I want to talk about this lifestyle modification. This slide is from the International Hypertension Guidelines. Recently, in the May 2020, it has come. They also said the same thing, whatever the other guidelines said. But I was very curious to know healthy drinks. In the column healthy drinks, if you see this moderate consumption of coffee, green and black tea. Other beverages that can be beneficial include carcade, hibiscus tea, pomegranate juice, beetroot juice, and cocoa. Of course, there are not many studies, but it's an observational study, but this is given by International Hypertension Guidelines. So this is what they say, healthy drinks. Of course, all the other things they have already, in the other guidelines also. And then, of course, regular physical activity, reduce stress and induce mindfulness. And they also mention about complementary alternative traditional medicine, which some people are taking, but they say use of such treatment is not yet supported. And then reduce exposure to air pollution and cold temperature. Evidence from studies support a negative effect on air pollution and blood pressure in the long-term study. So these are some of the points which they have given in the lifestyle modification. I saw Dr. Rajshekhar also gave this article yesterday in the WhatsApp. Treatment and control of hypertension in 2020, the need for substantial improvement. This was published only online yesterday, 9th September. We had fresh taken. The Gregory Kaufman, Howard Boucher, who has said the treatment and control of hypertension 2020 need for substantial improvement, and they conclude in the midst of the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic, in which elevated blood pressure level is a major comorbidity, it is especially important that clinicians and healthcare systems not be complacent about the control of hypertension. So that is why I am again saying people should focus on hypertension. We should not be complacent, and we all should come together and control this hypertension. And these are the guidelines. Everybody says the guidelines confused. There is no confusion at all. European guidelines says 140/90, ACC guidelines says 130/80, international guidelines says 130/85. Forget about that. What is the goal? The blood pressure goal is 130/80. So you'll have to try to get the 130/80, around 130/80. More about this, Dr. Cheniappan will talk. Why I say this? Because I want to set the context of the talk. So your treatment goal should be around 130/80. So we have already set 3 WhatsApp groups. Now I got requests for so many other ECG groups that we will consider and will start. And then if every day quiz program after the main talk by Cheniappan, the Kahoot in your laptop, be ready, and we will give you a game pin number. Please enter the pin and your name. You can play. There are 10 questions. For each question, we have to answer in 30 seconds. Those give correct answer early will get more marks. So today's panelists, Dr. Rajiv Gupta and Altumas, I will request them to join our WhatsApp group. So they'll be an expert. Whatever questions we can answer here, we'll answer. Otherwise, those questions will also be answered by them along with Rajshekhar and myself. Now, over to Dr. Cheniappan for his presentation. Thank you. I will stop sharing. Cheniappan, please take over.
Good evening, all of you. Good evening, Dr. Muruganathan sir, Dr. Rajshekhar sir, Dr. Rajiv Gupta sir, and also the delegates who are attending this hypertension masterclass series. And today's topic is a very important topic because it is going to deal with our day-to-day management of hypertension. So I named it as evidence and practical based. So it is not only evidence, there are some practical issues in our country where we may not be able to follow the evidence-based guidelines. So I want to start with the slide to say that the cardiovascular mortality risk the mortality, I want to emphasize on mortality. The mortality risk doubles for every 20 systolic, 10 diastolic millimeters of mercury increase, will increase the cardiovascular mortality twice. See, many of the times we think that the 140/90 is normal. But please remember, when you reduce 140/90 to 120/80, we think one patient comes with 140/90, we accept that, we continue the medicines. But 20 millimeters systolic reduction from here will reduce the cardiovascular mortality by twice. That's why we have to remember the best blood pressure for that particular patient, which will reduce the mortality in that patient. So Dr. Muruganathan nicely talked about healthy lifestyle modification. Why this is important? It is going to do three things. One, it is going to prevent hypertension itself, or it can delay the onset of high blood pressure, and also it can reduce cardiovascular risk because of hypertension. So because of three aims, we have to follow the healthy lifestyle. So Dr. Muruganathan talked about a DASH diet, and the most important, the beetroot and leafy vegetables are the ones which can give you some amount of nitrates and nitric oxide. That's why they are being promoted. And the rich nutrients which are rich in magnesium, calcium, and potassium, which are avocados, nuts, seeds, legumes, and tofu. And Dr. Muruganathan already talked about this. I just want to add one or two things, that you have to sleep well. You have to sleep at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep is necessary for the good control of blood pressure, medicines properly, and check your blood pressure. And we must not forget, when we prescribe a hypertension drug, an antihypertensive drug, it is not going to be the same for all seasons and all patients, because the blood pressure may be lowered because of high temperature, and it can become high in the lower temperature. That's why the seasonal adjustment of antihypertensive drugs are very important. In the cold, in the winter, you may have to increase the drugs, and in summer, you may have to decrease the drugs. In addition, we always talk about salt restriction, but once again, in our part of the world, in our part of the country, especially on the south, when the patient is working in a hot sun, as an agriculturer working in a hot sun, sweating a lot, and we cannot impose a strict salt restriction on that patient. So the salt restriction also depends upon the season, the job the patient is doing, so that we have to constantly adjust our antihypertensive medications according to the season, as well as according to the job of the patient. So having said that, we come to the most important confusion. Dr. Muruganathan said there is no confusion, but there is definitely a lot of confusion regarding at what blood pressure we have to start the drugs. That is the most difficult question to answer because of the three guidelines here: ACC, ESC, and ISH. ACC said stage 1 hypertension is 130 to 139 systolic, 80 to 89 diastolic. Here, above 130 itself, if the patient has got established atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, estimated cardiovascular risk by the ASCVD score is more than 10%. It's got diabetes and CKD, and ACC said you have to start a BP lowering medicine along with the non-pharmacological treatment. ESC 2018 called this blood pressure as high normal pressure, and in high normal pressure, it recommended to start medicines for those people who have a CVD alone, especially people who have got a coronary heart disease. Whereas even in stage 1 hypertension, the immediate drug treatment is necessary whenever the patient has got CVD, renal disease, or hypertension mediated organ disease. And they said even in stage 1 hypertension, if the patient has got a low to moderate risk without cardiovascular disease or any of the things mentioned above, 3 to 6 months of lifestyle intervention can be tried. So even stage 1 here, and these people wanted to start in 130, and here even above 140, without a risk factor, you can try lifestyle modification is a recommendation by the ESC. And we come to the latest guideline, International Society of Hypertension guideline. They define first stage itself as 140 to 159. And they said, especially the optimal treatment, when they have also said, whenever you have high risk factors, you must start above 140. Whereas here, high risk factors above 130. Here also, high risk factors above 130. Whereas if the patient is not having this high risk factors we have mentioned, Then once again, low to moderate risk patients without all the risk factors we have mentioned can try 3 to 6 months of lifestyle modification, then start a drug if it is not controlled. So you can see the recommendations of all the 3 guidelines have definitely varying thresholds of blood pressure to start. So where are we? I think we must have 130 threshold to start the antihypertensive management whenever the patient has got a coronary heart disease, heart failure, chronic kidney disease, diabetes mellitus, calculated risk more than 20%, and either less than 65 or more than 65. What is very important to know is whether the patient is active, he is independent, and he is able to tolerate antihypertensive treatment you are giving. So in these patients, we can start the medicine at 130. Whereas 140 will be the threshold in post-stroke patients, low-risk patients, and when the patient is more than 65 or less than 65, they are frail, multiple comorbidities are present, they are non-independent, and they are intolerant to the antihypertensive drug. Then you have to change the threshold of starting antihypertensive medication. What is very important to decide is not the age per se. The age is chronological age. What you have to see is the biological age of the patient, which means even a 70-year-old man may be very active, participating in veteran games and so on, whereas a 50-year-old patient may be so down and may not be do the activities at all. So what is very important is to see biological age rather than chronological age. Of course, there is no confusion as far as the target of blood pressure we are supposed to get. The target of blood pressure is less than 65 years. It should be less than 130/80, but not below 120/70. Whereas above 65 years, target will be less than 140/90 if tolerated. And once again, individualized BP target. This is what I told you, looking at the chronological age versus the biological age to decide what will be the target on this patient. And ISS recommends that you have to control the blood pressure. That means whatever the blood pressure you are starting the treatment, your target should be achieved with at least within 3 months. The target blood pressure should be achieved within 3 months of your starting of treatment. So with this idea, we go to the pharmacotherapy. So before you start a drug for hypertension, you have to answer 4 questions. One is, have I ruled out curable form of hypertension? Having ruled out curable form of hypertension, what are the risk factors I have? What is the hypertension mediated organ disease and its complications? What are the comorbid conditions and the drugs the patient is taking? So these are the 3 important questions after ruling out secondary hypertension. So if none of these things are present, then you can select any one of the 4 or 5 drugs we are going to say as initial drugs for a patient with hypertension. Whereas any one of these conditions are present, this means it becomes a compelling indication to start a particular drug in that situation. So that's why answering these questions, that's why we went into the clinical examination as well as the investigation ECG and echo to answer these 3 important questions as well as ruling out curable form of hypertension. So you will be in a position now to answer these questions, and none of these things are present, you can select any initial drug. There is a lot of controversy. Once again, there is confusion about what are the 4 or 5 initial drugs. Some of the guidelines have completely left beta blockers as the initial drug of choice, whereas ESC 2018 has included ACE inhibitor, ARBs, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, and diuretics, which can be thiazides as well as thiazide-like diuretics like chlorthalidone or indapamide. So these are 5 initial drugs. I must say that we must include beta blockers here because still we can use in some of the situations the beta blockers as the first line of drug. So these are the initial starting drugs in patients who have this group. According to the patient, you can select any one of these 5 drugs and you can start treating hypertension. A simple rule will be, I will not say rule, a simple suggestion will be, whenever the patient is less than 55 years, it is preferable to use A or B. A means ACE inhibitor or ARB or a beta blocker. If the patient is above 55 years, it is preferable to use diuretics, or calcium channel blockers. So the selection of these 5 drugs usually depends upon the age. Young patients, A or B. Old patients or patients above 50 years, it is C or D. So this is one approach to start a drug and then go to the maximum or add another drug and so on. That is the practice we have been doing for so many years. Whereas ISH, International Society of Hypertension, has come out with a suggestion that the stage 1 itself or the step 1 itself can be a combination. So this combination is a dual low dose combination, which means that half of maximally prescribed medication dose. So that means when you have an angiotensin inhibitor or a calcium blocker, what is the maximum tolerated dose or maximum prescribed dose for that? Half of it. And what is the maximum dose of calcium blocker? Half of it. That is the first step, dual low dose combination. Angiotensin inhibitor in the form of AC inhibitor or ARB plus calcium channel blocker. Type 2 or step 2 will be dual full dose combination. You go to the full dose of angiotensin inhibitor, you go to the full dose of calcium channel blocker. Then the third step is to add a diuretic. The third step is add a diuretic. So if still the BP is not controlled, then you have to look for the causes of pseudo resistance and resistance. And in resistant hypertension, along with the triple combination, one drug prescribed now is spironolactone. So very important drug in resistant hypertension. So here it is A, C plus D plus spironolactone of 25 to 50 milligram per day. So this is the International Society of Hypertension guideline to start with the combination, the first step itself, then increase the full dose combination. Third, you add a diuretic and then add spironolactone. So we have already seen it here. So there are certain situations in the first step, instead of starting angiotensin inhibitor and calcium channel blocker, that the dual low dose combination, you may have to select angiotensin inhibitor and diuretic in the first stage itself. These are the conditions where you have a post-stroke, very elderly patients, incipient heart failure, or calcium channel blocker intolerance. So in these 4 groups, the first step is likely to be AC inhibitor, diuretic of the dose, then full dose. Maybe in the third step, your calcium channel blocker will come here. So when you want to use spironolactone, there is a very important precaution you have to take. You have to make sure your GFR is more than 45 ml and your potassium is not more than 4.5. So these are the important precautions you must take when you start the spironolactone. In resistant, other drugs like amiloride, alpha blocker, eplerenone, clonidine, the beta blocker is not already used a beta blocker. So in this step, you must always include a beta blocker whenever there is a compelling indication, which means the patient has got a heart failure, angina, post-MI atrial fibrillation, young women with pregnancy or planning pregnancy, the first step itself, the beta blocker will come. So this is the approach by International Society of Hypertension. So when you come to the group of drugs, what will be the choice of drugs? In AC inhibitor, we prefer to use ramipril and perindopril. In ARB, we prefer to use telmisartan in the presence of a normal LV function, valsartan in LV dysfunction or post-MI situation, and losartan whenever the patient has got associated renal problem and LVH. Calcium channel blocker, still the gold standard calcium channel blocker is amlodipine. The newer calcium channel blocker, benitipine, is showing some promise. Diuretic is chlorthalidone and indapamide, thiazide-like diuretics. And on the beta blocker side, we prefer to use bisoprolol, metoprolol, carvedilol, in some cases, nebivolol. So these are the preferred drugs in that particular group. Here we have said the groups: AC, angiotensin inhibitor, channel blocker, diuretic, and what individual drug in that group you must use is we have given it here. So now we come to the compelling indication. We have seen how to treat a patient who does not have any compelling indication like risk factor, hypertension mediated organ disease, or comorbids. So let us go into a segment where whenever a patient has got hypertension plus hypertension mediated organ disease, how will you select the drugs? First, the left ventricular hypertrophy. We have said in the ECG section that the presence of left ventricular hypertrophy is going to increase the complications like arrhythmias, heart failure, as well as coronary heart disease and stroke. So that's why when you have echo or ECG evidence of left ventricular hypertrophy, best drugs to be used will be angiotensin inhibitors in the form of ARB or ACE inhibitor, which are the best drugs to regress left ventricular hypertrophy. Losartan has got a very good evidence in live trial where it showed by regressing left ventricular hypertrophy, you can reduce clinical events. The BP is not getting controlled, then you have a calcium channel blocker. One diuretic which can regress LVH is indapamide. So if you want to use a diuretic in LVH, it should be indapamide. Don't use the direct vasodilators like hydralazine, minoxidil, which can increase left ventricular hypertrophy. Then we come to the coronary heart disease, whether it is acute coronary syndrome or chronic coronary syndrome. The two important drugs are going to be beta blocker and RAS inhibitors in the form of AC inhibitor here. So here, these are the two important drugs we have to use it in coronary heart disease. If the BP is not getting controlled, then we have to add a calcium channel blocker. So the beta blocker in coronary heart disease is likely to be metoprolol, carvedilol, and bisoprolol. Bisoprolol is used in chronic coronary heart disease, may be used in chronic coronary heart disease, whereas in acute coronary syndrome, we like to use metoprolol and carvedilol. The AC inhibitor is going to be ramipril and perindopril. Still the BP is not getting controlled, then we have to add amlodipine. Of course, when the patient is symptomatic, the nitrates is also added because it can also give some amount of BP reduction by venodilatation. Then hypertension and heart failure, we are having heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction, heart failure with a preserved ejection fraction. The three drugs which are used in heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction are, in a stabilized patient, it is carvedilol, metoprolol, long acting. Heart failure, we don't use short acting, and bisoprolol. These are the three beta blockers which are indicated hypertension with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. On the RAS side, it is ARNI, which is preferred over AC inhibitor. It cannot be, it is not available, or it cannot be afforded, then AC inhibitor. If the AC inhibitor is not tolerated, then valsartan. Aldosterone antagonist in the form of spironolactone or eplerenone. The patient does have volume overload. It can be a loop diuretic. And in these patients, in spite of using all the drugs, the BP is still high. You can use amlodipine primarily to control blood pressure and not for reduction of heart failure related mortality or morbidity. So we are many questions about heart failure with the preserved ejection fraction. Now we understand the most important thing is to control blood pressure. The indications are likely to be the same, but we are not sure whether these drugs, as they reduce mortality and morbidity in heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, whether they are going to do the same in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction is a big question mark. So contraindications are verapamil, diltiazem, and oral beta blockers like atenolol and propranolol. Then hypertension and previous stroke can be largely prevented by BP control. The one important factor to prevent stroke is to control blood pressure. The target to start for a secondary stroke prevention is 140/90, but the target is less than 130/80. And of course, it may vary according to the elderly patient and the activity of the patient or fragility of the patient. The best proven drugs will be AC inhibitor plus diuretic. Like here, we have an evidence in the PROGRESS trial which produced secondary reduction in stroke. The BP is not in control, it will be calcium channel blocker. So the drugs in these groups are perindopril here, indapamide as a diuretic, amlodipine as a calcium channel blocker. This is for stroke. If the patient has got chronic kidney disease, the target BP is less than 130/80, and the drugs will be once again AC inhibitor or ARB. So once again, when you use AC inhibitor and ARB, Dr. Rajsekhar put a very nice article in Hypertension Kids. We have to keep watching. The most important is creatinine. If the creatinine increases more than 30% from baseline, or it is going to be doubled, or the potassium is going to be more than 5.5, EGFR fall more than 20%, you have to reassess the discontinuation or continuation of ARB or AC inhibitor. So additionally, if the GFR is good, it is thiazide diuretic, it is volume overloaded loop diuretic. If these drugs are not tolerated, the next drugs will be the calcium channel blocker, DHP, alpha blockers, hydralazine and clonidine. AC inhibitor and ARB are not used in bilateral renal artery stenosis. What is very important to see is there an additional proteinuria? Is there an additional proteinuria as a definite indication to use AC inhibitor or ARB? Do not combine AC inhibitor and ARB, especially in the absence of proteinuria. For any hypertension, it is preferable not to combine AC inhibitor and ARB. When you come to the atherosclerotic peripheral vascular disease, the one drug we cannot use will be a beta blocker. So if there is a bilateral renal artery stenosis, we cannot use AC inhibitor ARB. So if the best drugs will be the vasodilators like calcium channel blockers, AC inhibitor ARB after ruling out bilateral renal artery stenosis and alpha blockers, beta blocker is contraindicated in Raynaud's phenomenon. But this patient has got a coronary heart disease. You have a compelling indication. Even in the presence of peripheral vascular disease, we can use as bisoprolol, which may not have impact on the significant impact on the peripheral vessels. If the patient has got a hypertension, we can use nebivolol. If there's a compelling indication to use a beta blocker in peripheral vascular disease. Then we come to the associated risk factors, the drug selection. So this is my approach to a patient with the diabetes and hypertension. Once again, the target to start, the threshold to start is 130 to get the BP less than 130. Plus albumin is present. Definitely you have to select between AC inhibitor where it is ramipril or receptor blocker where it is telmisartan. Then if the BP is still high, we can add a calcium channel blocker. If the patient already has got an edema, then we can add diuretic in the form of indapamide. Still the BP is not under control. If the heart rate is more than 86, then we add a beta blocker, carvedilol. So all these steps, the BP is still not controlled, then we have to look for resistant hypertension. But the diabetic patient having a coronary heart disease, heart failure and LV dysfunction, straight away we will start with the two drugs like AC inhibitor ramipril and ARB of telmisartan with a beta blocker. Either ramipril or telmisartan plus carvedilol in the first stage itself. Then of course the next steps are going to be the same as like the second stage. You can use calcium channel blocker or a diuretic, depends upon the blood pressure and edema. There is no specific drug for lipid disorders, and we should not use older beta blocker and thiazide diuretics in patients with dyslipidemia. In dyslipidemia, if there is a compelling indication like coronary heart disease and heart failure, best beta blockers is likely to be carvedilol and bisoprolol. Diuretics is going to be indapamide. These drugs have least problem with the basic dyslipidemia. When the patient is a smoker, don't start a beta blocker first. Always try dihydrocalcium channel blocker and ARB. And of course, if the smoker has got a compelling indication like coronary heart disease, the two beta blockers are once again bisoprolol and nebivolol. When the patient has got obesity, especially mid-segment obesity, and most important drugs are the angiotensin inhibitors because they directly address the insulin resistance and try to control blood pressure. So any obese patient, if there is no compelling indication, beta blockers are not used because many other beta blockers can increase weight except carvedilol. If the patient is salt non-compliance, is not obeying salt restriction, then of course the best drug will be dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers. You can use that, and the carvedilol and bisoprolol will be used only when there is a compelling indication. Of course, the regular beta blockers or angiotensin inhibitors may not be very effective in the presence of salt non-compliance. The first drugs likely to be the dihydrocalcium channel blockers like amlodipine, plus if the patient has got a compelling indication, the beta blockers like this. When the patient young and has got erectile dysfunction, because in young patient, erectile dysfunction is endothelial dysfunction. It is not psychiatric, it is endothelial dysfunction. So we have to avoid all the older drugs like the atenolol, metoprolol, and the propranolol and thiazides in erectile dysfunction. Best drugs will be here, the calcium channel blockers like amlodipine, AC inhibitors like ramipril, and one ARB which has got some evidence for erectile dysfunction, is valsartan. If you have a compelling indication to use beta blocker, then it should be once again bisoprolol and nebivolol. Bisoprolol, we use it in coronary heart disease and heart failure. Nebivolol, we can use it as an hypertensive. When the patient has got a sleep apnea, they are usually obese. So naturally, the angiotensin inhibitors will come into play as the first drug. The aldosterone inhibitors have a very specific role because sleep apnea itself will produce a lot of aldosterone, which will produce resistant hypertension. In addition to that, aldosterone inhibitors are going to reduce the edema of the upper airway, thereby favorably altering the obstructive sleep apnea pathology. So always look for sleep apnea and refractory hypertension. Apnea, hypopnea index more than 15, the CPAP may help to control the blood pressure. Here you have to once again avoid beta blockers if there are no compelling indications. Then we come to the comorbid conditions, how to select the drugs in comorbid conditions. I start with the uric acid. When the patient has got gout or uric acid increase, the best drugs will be the losartan. This is not the group benefit, like it is not there for any other ARB because losartan specifically blocking uric acid transporter. So this is peculiar effect of uric acid reduction for losartan. Of course, the drug we should not use when there is high uric acid is hydrochlorothiazide. When the patient has got HIV and AIDS, lot of our antihypertensives will have a significant drug interaction with antiretroviral drugs like protease inhibitors and other drugs. The important drugs are once again the metoprolol and also the atenolol may not have significant drug interaction. The two indications to use atenolol in hypertension is when the patient has got a liver disease and hypertension because atenolol is excreted to the kidney. And second indication is HIV and AIDS when the patient is already on protease inhibitors. And once again, your calcium channel blockers will have a drug interaction. Losartan will have a drug interaction. And of course, the telmisartan and valsartan in ARBs, they may not have a drug interaction. So when there is an HIV and AIDS, when the patient is on antiretroviral drugs, you have to carefully select the drugs which will not have a significant drug interaction with the basic drugs for HIV and AIDS. Then we come to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And please remember, even chronic pulmonary disease patients die of cardiovascular disease, and most often they die of hypertension related complications. That's why the target is less than 130/80. So the best drug will be the calcium channel blockers like amlodipine, and the ARBs can be used. ACE inhibitor, we may have some reservation because of the cough it may produce and may interfere with the patient's well-being. And the drugs, if at all, once again, is there a compelling indication? COPD PPD patient has got heart failure, he has got coronary heart disease, then use bisoprolol and nebivolol. Avoid the other beta blockers we have mentioned, atenolol, propranolol, and also the carvedilol. Carvedilol, the beta blocker component is non-selective. And of course, significant diuresis will decrease the secretions and make the secretions very thick and may also unfavorably alter the course of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. When the patient is on NSAID, the best drug is once again calcium channel blockers because they are not going to be interfered by the NSAIDs. ACE inhibitor may be less effective, and also the beta blockers also may be less effective in patients who are on NSAIDs. If it is possible, it is better to withdraw the NSAIDs, but the patient has to take NSAID for his movement is so incapacitated due to the arthritis and so on, then the drug will be a calcium channel blocker. We now look at rheumatic heart diseases, especially as a risk enhancers for a coronary heart disease, like rheumatoid arthritis and so on. So here the best choice will be RAS inhibitors and calcium channel blockers plus or minus diuretics. Instead of using NSAIDs, it is preferable to use biological drugs here. So high dose of NSAID should be avoided. In psychiatric diseases, especially RAS inhibitors and diuretics are the best drugs, and beta blockers should not be given, especially metoprolol, propranolol, atenolol, which may increase depression. And of course, you have to be very careful when you use calcium channel blockers because it can produce significant orthostatic hypotension. So we looked at all the three segments: hypertension mediated organ disease, associated risk factors, and important comorbid conditions. So now we come to the combination, because definitely your recent guidelines are coming out. Even the first step, you have to use a combination. So when the BP is not at target, you have two options. One, to increase the first drug or add a second drug. So that's what you can, for example, you have started telmisartan 40, BP is not target. You can either increase telmisartan to 80, or with a 40 milligram of telmisartan, you can add a thiazide diuretic. When you look at the systolic blood pressure, which is more difficult to control, as you can see it here, if you increase the drug, you see the blood pressure reduction, whereas when you add a drug, you see the blood pressure reduction. So always it is preferable to add two drugs with got a complementary actions on blood pressure, where you can get a very good blood pressure control. Similarly, for valsartan, instead of increasing to 160, if you add a thiazide, your blood pressure control is good enough, and similarly. So this I have told you in the pathophysiology slide, and these are the blood pressure is cardiac output and peripheral resistance. Hypertension is increased cardiac output and increased peripheral resistance. The four important variables which are going to control these two aspects are the preload and contractility is going to influence cardiac output. Vasoconstriction and vascular hypertrophy is going to influence peripheral resistance. We use diuretic to reduce preload, beta blocker to reduce contractility, calcium channel blocker and alpha blocker for reducing the spasm, and angiotensin inhibitor for regressing smooth muscle hypertrophy. So when you have four groups of drugs, what are the principles of combination? First principle of combination is to use two drugs which are acting on different mechanisms. One mechanism is cardiac output, another mechanism is peripheral resistance. So you select one drug for cardiac output reduction, one drug for peripheral resistance reduction. That is one principle of combination. Then second principle of combination is you select two drugs which are acting on the same mechanism, which means you are combining beta blocker and diuretic, but they are acting on different pathways. Or you can combine calcium channel blocker and angiotensin inhibitors for the same mechanism, but two different pathways. And third option is to combine the same mechanism and the same pathway. That is very rare. So combining drugs with two mechanisms, combining drugs with the same mechanism with two pathways, or combining two drugs with the same mechanism, same pathway. So let us see. So different mechanisms is cardiac output and peripheral resistance. Same mechanism, different pathway is on the cardiac output side or peripheral resistance side. Same mechanism and same pathway is once again on the cardiac output side or peripheral resistance side. This is the best combination because they are acting on different mechanisms. So the two drugs which are acting on the cardiac output will be beta blockers and diuretic. So you can combine with the three drugs which are acting on the peripheral resistance. And what will be the indications? Beta blocker and calcium channel blockers, ideal for coronary heart disease. Beta blockers and angiotensin inhibitors, ideal for heart failure because we try angiotensin inhibitors, ACE inhibitors and beta blockers in heart failure. Beta blocker and alpha blocker is a very rare combination we use, maybe in renal failure. Then we come to the next drug which is acting on the cardiac output, diuretic. Diuretic and ACE inhibitor, very favorable combination. It may get you the blood pressure down and it is definitely used in heart failure, especially the loop diuretic, aldosterone inhibitor plus angiotensin inhibitor is a very good combination in heart failure. Then diuretic and calcium channel blocker, once again, we rarely use primarily in patients with isolated systolic hypertension. And the diuretic and alpha blocker is once again rarely used, maybe in patients with CKD. So this is the first set of combination where one drug is acting on cardiac output, another drug is acting on peripheral resistance, and there are indications. The second principle is the same mechanism, but different pathways. There we have to look at the cardiac output mechanism and peripheral resistance mechanism. On the cardiac output mechanism, the beta blocker plus diuretic, the most important combination we have to avoid in diabetes mellitus. So this combination will not be the first combination we are going to use in diabetes mellitus. And of course, on the peripheral resistance side, calcium channel blockers and angiotensin inhibitors are the best combination. As you have seen in ISH guideline, they said the first step itself is using the low dual combination of calcium channel blocker and the angiotensin inhibitors, because angiotensin inhibitors will give you not only reduction of blood pressure, but also the protection of target organs like your heart, blood vessels, and brain. And the calcium channel blockers are the one which are the best to get your numbers down. So you get the dual benefit of getting the number down, protecting the target organ disease. That's why it becomes the best combination. Then when will you use angiotensin inhibitor and an alpha blocker? Sometimes in diabetes mellitus, and especially when the patient has got benign prostatic hypertrophy, alpha blocker may be a good drug there to reduce blood pressure and favorably alter the symptoms of benign prostatic hypertrophy. And calcium channel blocker and alpha blocker can be used in refractory hypertension as well as patient with a CKD. If the patient is not eligible or not tolerating angiotensin inhibitors, then this combination can be given in CKD. So here we are the same mechanism. On the cardiac output side, beta blocker plus diuretic. On the peripheral resistance side, calcium channel blocker with angiotensin inhibitor, or angiotensin inhibitor plus alpha blocker, or a calcium channel blocker with alpha blocker. So these are the indications. Very rarely we use the same mechanism, same pathway. The best example here is on the cardiac output side, where we combine many diuretics. We combine a thiazide diuretic, a loop diuretic. We combine also aldosterone inhibitor, especially in heart failure. Thiazide loop diuretic can be combined when the patient has got heart failure and also hypertension. And in heart failure especially, you combine almost all the three. Sometimes in refractory fluid overload, we can also use thiazide-like diuretics like metolazone. We can use a loop diuretic like furosemide or torsemide. We also add spironolactone or eplerenone. So the only indication where you are going to use the same mechanism, same pathway is going to be on diuretic. Very rarely on the peripheral resistance side, we have used in some patients the combination of dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker plus non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker, especially when the patient has got a coronary heart disease and he cannot be having beta blocker because of the significant bronchial asthma and some supraventricular arrhythmias. Wherever the beta blockers cannot be combined with the dihydrocalcium channel blocker, we have combined and used the combination. But the most important caveat here is the patient should have a normal left ventricular function. Don't ever combine AC inhibitor and ARB. Peripheral resistance, same pathway, same mechanism. Then the problem comes whether I am going to give it as a single drug, as I am going to give it two drugs. Fixed combination, flexible combination. But I am for the flexible combination. It's my personal opinion. Because the individual drug titration is possible. Because I am using a calcium blocker in the night and beta blocker in the morning. If the heart rate is high, I will increase my beta blocker. But the blood pressure is not controlled, my heart rate is 60, I will increase calcium channel blocker. This type of freedom is not there for me if I use fixed combination. Compliance may be not good for flexible, it's good. Cost is relatively costly because you have to pay for two drugs. And the chemical formulation, we are always worried. When you give a drug as two drugs in a single tablet form, what will be the bioavailability of the individual drugs when compared to the individual drugs given in separate times? So that may be an issue which I'm always worried with all that of formulations the people are advocating and promoting. So this is what I told you, individual timings and dosage intervals can be modified. You cannot be modified here. What are the combinations to be avoided? Beta blocker and diuretics in diabetes mellitus. AC inhibitor and ARB, hypertension and CKD. Beta blockers and clonidine, if they will produce significant bradycardia. beta blockers and non-dihydrogen calcium channel blockers like verapamil, diltiazem in a bradycardia. Beta blocker and AC inhibitor ARB, very good combination when the patient has got CAD or heart failure, and they are not very good combination for a simple treatment of hypertension. AC inhibitor, ARB, and aldosterone are the most dangerous combinations because they produce significant hyperkalemia. So these are the combinations to be avoided. So sometimes even in stage 1, now the recommendations are coming that even stage 1 you can use combination, but in stage 1 itself you have to start a combination in this particular conditions. If the patient has got a CAD and stage 1 hypertension, it should be beta blocker and ramipril. If the patient has got a LV dysfunction, even if it's asymptomatic, specific beta blockers we have told you plus ramipril. Heart failure, specific beta blocker plus AC inhibitor and aldosterone inhibitor. First stage itself. Diabetes and coronary heart disease, I have mentioned that it should be carvedilol or angiotensin inhibitors like ramipril. In stroke, for secondary prevention, AC inhibitor and indapamide. In heart failure and renal failure, where there is AC inhibitor intolerance, the best combination will be hydralazine and nitrates. So although there is a controversy whether I have to start a single drug and then add a drug, so in these conditions, you have to definitely start these 2 drugs simultaneously, not to control blood pressure, but actually to influence the basic heart disease with hypertension, because these 2 drugs are not only going to control your blood pressure, they are going to terribly influence the outcome of these basic diseases when you use this combination. Then the controversy comes whether I should give the drug in the morning, give in the afternoon, give in the night. So my approach is to give beta blockers and diuretics in the morning, because if I see the patient's hypertension is because of the stress induced, his office induced, and so on, because we cannot give the diuretic in the night. And we would prefer to give AC inhibitor ARB in the night, because many of the trials have given, especially the HOPE trial, you have given AC inhibitor in the night, showed a huge benefit. And of course, calcium channel blockers can be given at any time. So left to me, I will give it after lunch, because when you give calcium channel blocker after a good food the patient is taking, the absorption of calcium channel blockers will be little slow, and it may not be coming into the circulation abruptly, or it can be used in the morning, or it can be used in the night. So this is my personal approach. There is, of course, there are a lot of discussions and controversies going on, and there are certain papers appearing that the night dose hypertension antihypertensives will have a better outcome from the complications and so on. So, but this is a basic logical approach to give the drugs like this. Then, of course, we have a lot of new drugs. You may be wondering why I'm not talking at all about all the new drugs which everybody is jumping about. The new CCBs and ARBs are flooding the pharmaceutical market, and we are bombarded with all sorts of things. And my humble opinion is that all these newer drugs have reduced surrogate endpoints, all right, but we don't have convincing data till today that they reduce clinical endpoints like heart failure, stroke, or myocardial infarction, or kidney disease. So among all this, I personally feel the benedipine is a little bit promising, but you have to wait for a little more time for the 1 or 2 studies for endpoint clinical reduction has come for this molecule only. All these drugs are from Japan and China, and till today we have no guideline recommendation to use them in our day-to-day practice. So do no harm. We learned it from Hippocrates. So don't do harm. Drugs non-selection now. So I have not talked about the secondary hypertension. Do no harm by not recognizing the cause of secondary hypertension, which can be curable. And the drugs to be avoided in some of the secondary hypertensions, we already told you about TRAPT. In CKD, atenolol is avoided. In renal artery stenosis bilateral, AC inhibitor and ARBs are avoided. In obstructive sleep apnea, beta blockers and sedatives are avoided. Primary hyperaldosteronism, where there is already hypokalemia, don't use thiazide and loop diuretics. In alcohol, don't ask me a drug so that I can take the drug and continue alcohol. There is no drug like that. For alcohol, stop or reduce alcohol. And drugs especially, we have to avoid NSAIDs and COX-2 inhibitors. Pheochromocytoma, beta blocker is not the first drug of choice. You must always use it alpha blocker and then beta blocker. Hypothyroidism, once again, beta blockers can produce further bradycardia. Calcium channel blocker may produce further edema. In hyperthyroidism, all your vasodilators will further increase the heart rate by stimulating sympathetic system. In Cushing's, of course, the beta blockers will further increase in weight. In hyperparathyroidism, where there is already high calcium, thiazides will produce more calcium retention. So these are the drugs we cannot use in this particular secondary hypertension. But important thing is, in secondary hypertension, you have to treat the basic cause. Then I'm going to tell you where not to use these drugs. That's why I started with saying drugs non-selection. Diuretics, compelling contraindication is gout. Possible contraindications are metabolic syndrome, diabetes, pregnancy, hypercalcemia, and hypokalemia. Beta blockers, we all know about the classical contraindication. The metabolic side effects are less with the beta blockers such as carvedilol and bisoprolol. And calcium channel blockers, there is no compelling contraindication here. That is the most advantageous news about the calcium channel blocker of dihydropyridine. Of course, tachyarrhythmia, I told you it will increase tachycardia, heart failure, pre-existing liver edema. So usually you don't stop dihydropyridine as an isolated initial drug in the patients with coronary heart disease. We must always start a beta blocker, then only add dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker. Verapamil and diltiazem, significant bradycardia, AV block, LV dysfunction, and the severe constipation is a relative contraindication for any calcium channel blocker. Pregnancy, previous angioneuritic edema, hyperkalemia of more than 5.5, bilateral renal stenosis are the contraindications of ACE inhibitor as well as ARBs. And of course, the women who are likely to become pregnant and who are pregnant and ACE inhibitor ARB cannot be used. So we have already seen the drug non-selection. What will be the takeaways? So the question comes, you have said less than 130/80. What is my lower limit? Up to what level I can reduce the blood pressure? So this is from European Society of Guideline 2018. It has said in some of the conditions we have mentioned, especially associated risk factor and target organ disease. So 16 to 85, so this is hypertension. The target is 130. So 130 in diabetes and 140 to 130 in CKD, 130, 130. So in majority of patients, it is 130. The diastolic is always less than 80, but more than 70. In elderly people, the target may be 140 in all groups. More than 88 years, target may be 140. So these are the targets, but in many of the situations, ESC recommended not to lower the systolic pressure less than 120. So that is our lower limit. So with all this, what I should do tomorrow? Always check blood pressure yourself using the correct methodology, correct blood pressure apparatus, correct position of the patient, and correct procedure. Don't be satisfied one reading per visit. Always take 3 readings per each visit and try to get the average blood pressure. Always encourage the out of clinic blood pressure monitoring. We have told you the advantages of this in our the previous sections. At least once in a year, you can do an ambulatory BP monitoring, which will give an idea about the nighttime blood pressure. Assess the risk of the patient before you treat. No longer the treatment of hypertension is reducing the number. Now the treatment of hypertension depends upon the risk of the patient and also the reducing the risk of the patient. So that look at the patient and what is his risk of developing future cardiovascular disease, whether it's a diabetic, CKD, when all these things are not there, use the risk scores to identify whether it's a high risk or low risk. Do not accept 140/90 as normal, especially in high risk individuals, because for many years we have accepted this as the normal blood pressure. 140/90 is no longer a normal blood pressure. According to the ACC guideline, this becomes a stage 2 hypertension actually. And majority of patients try to get the patient less than 130/80. How we are going to get it depends upon many things I told you, depending upon the age of the patient, depending upon the fragility of the patient, depending upon the tolerance of the patient, depending upon the comorbid conditions. You have to set your target. So we cannot say achieve this for all age group. So once again, the antihypertensive medication, the hypertension medication treatment is highly individualized. Use appropriate drugs for the patient for particular conditions. We have said that what should be used in different hypertension mediated organ disease, when there is associated risk factor, when there is a comorbid conditions, and so on. Use the right combination and not the wrong combinations. We have told you the principles of combination, which combinations are the best, which combinations are not good. And of course, the most important thing is improve the patient compliance and adherence. Always we feel compliance and adherence are the same. No. Compliance is patient obeying you and strictly following your advice without himself involved. The adherence is he is following your advice with involvement of himself, with the interest himself, which will make the patient love the treatment, love you, and adhere to the treatment. So always first get the compliance, then convert the compliance into adherence. It may be due to lifestyle modification and through many drugs. The cost, you have to look at the lifestyle modification, look at the drugs and side effects, the cost of the drugs you are prescribing, and of course, motivate the patient to get the drugs and continue the drugs and lifestyle modification. With this, with all these 10 factors only, you can get the target blood pressure and maintain the target blood pressure for lifelong to prevent the hypertensive mortality and morbidity in our population. So the last question is, having said all that, many of us feel all this is for patients, not for us. Please check your blood pressure. So please make sure your blood pressure is under control. Then only you can treat others' high blood pressure. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Chennipan. All of you will agree, such a simple, very clear message. And whatever complications, whatever confusions, he made it very simple. And I'm sure even the panelists will agree. The presentation was excellent. I think before I go to the panelists, I will take 3 minutes or maximum 4 minutes for our regular Kahoot. By the way, I'm very happy to invite Dr. Altamas because we are missing you. Thank you very much for participating. He's an endocrinologist, a young and energetic endocrinologist from Mumbai. Now we'll play Kahoot. I think everybody is ready. No need to explain about Kahoot. Now I'll give the game pin. Then once I give the game pin, all of you can play. And those of you who have not downloaded the Kahoot, please do the downloading. I'm also requesting both Dr. Rajiv Gupta and Dr. Altamas to join one of our WhatsApp groups. Sir, we have got 3 WhatsApp groups, Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, where we discuss every day a lot of practical points on hypertension. So we'll be happy if you can join and clear some of our doubts from the members. You need not be very active every day, but whenever there is a question and your specialty, you may chip in and give the answer. And whatever questions we can answer today, we'll answer. The rest of the questions, normally we'll take it to the group, and tomorrow we'll answer those questions. I think already you have got some 20 questions there for each one of you. So try to choose the question. After I play the Kahoot, I'll come back to you. So, ready? Okay. Now the game number will come. Already 73 players are there. Yeah, the pin number is 6041797. The game pin number 6041797. There are 10 questions, 30 seconds for each question. So I repeat, There will be 10 questions. Every question 30 seconds. Whoever answers before, say let us say in 10 seconds, they'll get more marks than a person who answers in 20 seconds. Maybe right answer. So I think Altamas, we do every day this Kahoot also. It's very interesting. You can also do in your webinars. Rajiv Gupta sir, it will be very interesting. You also watch sir. We'll ask some simple question. We give 30 seconds each for every question. Now already 51 players have joined. So we'll wait for another 20 seconds before I start the game. Tirumala, Kadireshan, Mahi, AVA. Believe me, I am recording all these players' name. At the end of the program, we will recognize who has done. I am happy Prabhuram, a pulmonologist from my place, Tirupur, is also joined today. And yes, I think I'll stop with this. Now I'll go for the game. I'll start the game now. Ready? Yeah, now 70 people have come. Interactive session 5. 3, 2, 1. This is your question now. Please, the management of hypertension, following things to be considered before starting the treatment. A, HMOD. B, other risk factors. C, comorbid. D, all of the above. The management of hypertension, following things to be considered before starting treatment. I'm happy already 63 answers have come. 13 seconds more, 12 seconds more, 11 seconds more. 9 seconds is 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. 60 people have answered very good. Good. I think Chenipen's talk was so good. Everybody could understand and answer. 60 people. Now I'll go to the next question. Before that, of course, Parthasarathi has answered correctly in 10 seconds. So that's why he's got 925, followed by Govind and Padma Shri. I'll go to the next question. The second question for you is, which of the following lifestyle modifications will produce maximum BP reduction? 1, DASH diet. 2, B, salt restriction. C, exercise. D, sleeping. Which of the following lifestyle modification will produce maximum BP reduction? DASH diet, dietary approach to systemic hypertension. Salt restriction, exercise and sleep. Good. 67 answered. Very good. 31 have answered. DASH diet is the answer. Let us see who is now leading. Now Rick Meity is now leading 1862, followed by Karthi, then Pras. We'll go to the next question. Third question for you. The threshold of systolic blood pressure for starting drugs is a known CAD patient is 120, B 130, C 140, and D 150. What is the threshold of systolic blood pressure for starting drugs in a known coronary artery disease patient? Three seconds more. 2, 1. Very good. It is 130. 44 have answered correctly. Let us see who's now. Still, Rick Meity is leading. The next question for you, fourth question. Initial drugs for uncomplicated hypertension include all except angiotensin inhibitor, alpha blocker, calcium channel blocker, and diuretics. Initial drugs for uncomplicated hypertension include all except angiotensin, alpha, calcium channel, and diuretic. Very simple question. I think all of you must answer rightly. Correctly. Correct. 69 answers. Very good. 62 have answered alpha blocker. That's a good answer. Now let's see who's leading. Still Rick is leading. Now we'll go to the fifth question. The ideal initial combination is beta blocker with diuretic, calcium channel blocker with beta blocker, ACE plus CCB or ARB plus CCB, D is ACE or ARB with diode. The ideal combination is 16 seconds more. I think in 15 seconds, 60 people have answered. I think next time I will reduce the duration of the answer. 20 seconds is enough, I think. Most of you are answering within 20 seconds. That's very good. Good. 45 have answered correctly. ACE or ARB with CCB. And now the score still Rick Matey is leading. Then the sixth question, HPB plus CAD, which is not the initial drug. Metoprolol, amlodipine, ACE inhibitor, or nicorandil. High blood pressure with CAD, which is not the initial drug. Is it metoprolol, ACE, amlodipine, or nicorandil? Only 12 have answered. Which is not the initial drug is amlodipine, which is not the initial drug. Okay. Now, I think Ranjit has taken over. Rick has come second. Jayanti. Now, the next question, seventh question. Patient with high blood pressure and CKD, which of the following drugs is contraindicated? Atenolol, B. Metoprolol, C. Carvedilol, D. Bisoprolol. In CKD with high blood pressure, which is a drug contraindicated? I think 20 seconds, more than 58 people have answered. That's good. Correct answer, atenolol. So the drug to be avoided is the atenolol. We'll see who's now leading. Still Ranjit, Rick second, Jayanti third, Koday fourth. The eighth question, patient has resistant hypertension due to obstructive sleep apnea. Which is the preferred drug? Patient has resistant hypertension due to OSA. Which drug you prefer? Metoprolol, amlodipine, telmisartan, or eplerenone? What is the drug preference in OSA with hypertension, resistant hypertension? Thirty people have answered. It is eplerenone. Okay. Now the scoreboard is still Ranjit is leading, Koday second. Ricky has not gone. Now the ninth question. In SALT non-compliant patient, the drug of choice is ACE, ARB, CCB, beta blocker. In SALT non-compliant patient, the drug of choice is ACE, ARB, CCB, beta blocker. Answer correctly, CCB. The scoreboard still Ranjit is leading, followed by Koday. Rick has come in the fifth place. Now the last question. A smoker has IBP and CAD. The drug of choice for a smoker who has got IBP and CAD. Amlodipine, ARB, bisoprolol, indapamide. I'm sure most of you will answer because it was dealt in detail with Sinipan the last 5 minutes. Smoker with high BP and CAD. (26) have answered bisoprolol. Let's see the score and then we'll go to the who's the winner. The third is Sivendran. And the first, Ranjit. Oh, very good. Okay, fine. The runners-up are Rick, Mai, and Koday. Okay, now I'll stop sharing. Now we'll go to the panelist. Very good. I think Rajiv, please unmute. Uh, you are a very much experienced person in the hypertension, and your expert views on the management of hypertension. Some practical tips as a senior physician and as a researcher.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 important issues which need to be clearly mentioned here is, number one is the lifestyle changes, which I believe is a crucial intervention, because it all begins with lifestyle. We try to convince everyone to follow a good lifestyle, and that accelerates or that also improves the compliance to drugs, adherence to drugs, also increases the efficacy of drugs. One issue is about the salt controversy. Salt is a very controversial area of debate, especially in tropical countries like us. There is an upper limit of salt consumption, and so upper limit, we all know that is about 5 grams or 6 grams of salt per day. But lower limit also has to be taken in mind. In the temperate climates, you can have lower limit of salt of 2 grams or even less than 2 grams of salt a day. But I think in our country, at least 3 to 4 grams of salt per day is required. So we need to have a lower limit of salt intake and an upper limit of salt intake. Although it may sound controversial, but we have just recently published an article in the European Heart Journal, just coming up actually, just saying that this controversy, because there are no specific trials which have looked at the lowest limit of salt intake. So that's number one. Number two, we never talk of sugar sweetened beverages, which is a rich source of not only sugars and calories, but also of sodium. So I think that also has to be kept in mind. The third thing is pollution. And I think pollution is gradually emerging as a hypertension risk factor, especially in our country where the household pollution is very high. We need to be very careful in advising patients to avoid household pollution, especially in women, because women are the ones who are exposed to pollution in kitchens, organic material, PM 2.5 particles. So I think we have to, again, keep a mind on that. I won't go into details of the obstructive sleep apnea because I think people have already talked about it, and there is a next session on complex hypertension, and I'm sure people will be talking of obstructive sleep apnea. A new drug in the hypertension or heart failure armamentarium is the SGLT2 inhibitors, and I'm sure that Altamas will be interested in that particular aspect, because SGLT2 not only has anti-diabetic effect, now we all know that it has prevention of CKD. We have a DAPA CKD trial just published, just presented at the ESC last week. So that's very important study on heart failure, on CKD, hypertension, and heart failure, all the three groups of diseases, where even in non-diabetic people, this drug is very, very effective. And it's an emerging drug. Peripheral vascular disease, I believe that nebivolol is a drug of choice because it does not cause severe vasoconstriction. If you have to give beta blockers in presence of peripheral arterial disease, nebivolol is a drug of choice. One issue of reducing cardiovascular risk, and I think an emerging therapy will be of statins, because now we talk in terms of reducing the risk, not in terms of only reducing the numbers. And I mean, there are two trials actually, all at lipid lowering arm and the HOPE-3 trial. Both of them have shown that it is the statins which, if we combine statin with antihypertensive medication, irrespective of the cholesterol or the LDL levels, you achieve a greater reduction in cardiovascular endpoints. So whatever antihypertensive therapy you give, at least in a person who has a slightly higher risk, at least one more risk factor, it is wise to start statin with them, irrespective of the LDL cholesterol level. And finally, I think a very important component of our therapy, of a good practice, has to be de-prescribing. I always call it de-prescribing. That means you should keep on watching your patient's blood pressure If the blood pressure is to target, don't forget the patient. Keep on watching him. Look for signs of hypotension or postural hypotension, especially in a giddy person who is complaining of giddiness, postural hypotension. And then that patient, I think, prescribing is very important. We need to reduce the drugs and after some time, because sometimes patients lose weight, they go strict on the lifestyle controls, and in that prescribing is important. I will not talk of the renal degeneration therapies now because it's a separate topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv Gupta, sir, for that. You're sharing your wisdom out of your experience. Altumas, I was about to talk about, call you for this only. Now they say SGLT is no more an anti-diabetic drug. It is a cardiologist drug. So your opinion on it, short opinion on SGLT and the role in diabetic hypertension and in hypertension per se.
So there are two ways of looking at it. Good evening, everybody. And I'm sorry I joined a little late because of the ICU thing, and also that there's a lot of rain in Mumbai, so there may be network issues. So there are two ways of looking at this. We also say that is heart failure a cardiology disease, or heart failure is an endocrinological manifestation of a hormonal disease. So if you look into pathogenesis, pathophysiology, and the disease progression, and even if you look at from a treatment point of view, it is the hormones and the drugs which act on the hormone receptors with which the heart failure actually gets treated. So if you're talking about heart failure itself as an endocrine disorder, and if you look at a drug like SGLT2, which is just 5 years old, we just celebrated DAPA's 5 years last week, as Dr. Rajiv sir just said earlier. So these are drugs which are meant maybe for a multi-speciality. These are drugs which are here to stay. They definitely were a moderate anti-hyperglycemic like DPP-4. Their efficacy increases further when there is a weight loss in a particular sector of population. Although we've seen a lot of around weight loss of only of 3 to 5 kg in multiple trials across the world. However, in our population, Asian Indian subjects, we've seen weight loss of much more than that, which means that not only just the anti-diabetic other medications come down after SGLT2, it is also the anti-hypertensives come down. Now we also have an evidence which came recently that they reduce the fibrosis in the liver, they reduce the LFT which is being abnormal, they may have some role in cirrhosis. So not only from the endocrine perspective, but also from cardio to the renal, the nephrologist, and to gastroenterologist. And we do not know whether it's going to have some role in epilepsy and in those places where we want to have kind of ketosis and other diseases where drugs like this can actually help when we have a background condition like this. So I think if we have to conclude from all the clinical trials and with even DAPA, even though it does not harm people, those who do not have diabetes, but it has an action on people, those who completely having raised glucose, whether even in IGT or an IFG or a pre-existing diabetes. These are good drugs and should be used, and their systolic reduction is around 2 to maximum up to 5 millimeters of mercury, and diastolic is around 1 to 3 to maximum 4 millimeters. And the evidence is coming ever since the drugs were released since 2014-15. So I would stand at the place that yes, these are anti-diabetic drugs, but however, it also has a pleiotropic and other activities. We may call it as a smart diuretic or a smart endocrine drug, and that is how the action goes on. I think
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Altumas. Dr. Rajshekhar, Reserpine, the status of Reserpine today, because we have been using Adalfin, a drug called Adalfin long back. So you still, Reserpine is in here nowadays. Any recent studies or trials, because you are the trial specialist?
No, sir, Reserpine is no longer used. It is a centrally acting drug. It has got an impact on catecholamine pump. So it is centrally acting, and also it impairs the vascular endothelial function, even erectile dysfunction and so on. And also because It crosses blood-brain barrier, even are very common in reserpine. It is no longer used. It is being stopped.
Okay. What is the preferred antihypertensive combination in stroke, CKD, on dialysis? Any one of you can take this. Preferred antihypertensive combination in stroke and CKD. Chenipan?
Sir,
Yeah.
Yes.
Preferred antihypertensive combination in stroke, CKD, on dialysis.
Rajshekhar sir, you can answer, sir.
no, you can't.
Okay.
See,
Mm.
the carvedilol is an intradialytic, is an ideal beta blocker. Calcium channel blockers are also ideal, as Dr. Chennappan has very much pointed out and has put the combination in the slide. Please, Chennappan.
Yes, sir, that the important problem about dialysis is the very highly variable blood pressure. You see, when the patient goes into dialysis and there is a sudden drop in blood pressure on the dialysis day. So we see a lot of patients like this nowadays. And so what we do is to stop on antihypertensives actually on the day before, especially depending upon the long acting or a short acting drug, we stop the duration of antihypertensive delay. So it's a very variable scenario. In a dialysis, it's a variable scenario. So as I said, that the safer drug will be a carvedilol, because this is a very good drug for cardiorenal syndrome also. So that could be a very good drug, but we have to be very careful in keep checking the blood pressure and adjusting the blood pressure dose. And some of the patients will develop severe hypotension of dialysis. So that is one of the precaution.
Especially intra-dialysis, there is a problem of hypotension as well as hypertension.
Yes.
And post-dialysis also there will be a problem. So that is why we advise home blood pressure monitoring, especially when the patient is in dialysis. Thank you, Chenipan. My friend from Prabhuram from Tirupur, he has asked me a question. Amlodipine or cilindapine, which is more advantageous in controlling BP? Any specific condition in which one is beneficial than other? Raju sir, you can take up. Rajesh Gupta sir.
I think as far as the antihypertensive efficacy is concerned, both are the same. The only issue is the edema of the feet, because amlodipine, nifedipine at the highest edema of the feet. Amlodipine also causes leg edema after a variable intervals. They say that cilindapine causes less edema because of the dual blockade. But I personally believe that both cause the same amount. Cilindapine causes slightly less edema. And if CCB is causing edema, you need to stop any of these two. The problem here is that patients who gets edema, he is very concerned that my kidneys are failing. And that's why we have to teach him very well that no, it's not the kidney problem. It is basically a fluid retention problem or a vasodilatory problem. That's the important thing. But then many patients do not believe in you, and they keep on saying that we need to stop the drug or we need to change the drug. So we have to change the drug.
In the same question, what about your Melidefin? What is your feeling? Because Chenipan said it is giving promising results. Rajiv, do you use Melidefin?
I think it's basically efficacy-wise, the duration of action is slightly longer with Melidefin as compared to the other two drugs. But again, the efficacy is the same. So I think the mechanism is basically the same. Efficacy is the same. The incidence of edema is also the same. So we can, it depends on your choice. Whatever you want to use, you can use.
Okay. Where do you place moxonidine in the management of hypertension? Chenipan or Rajshekhar? Where do you place moxonidine in the management of hypertension? Centrally acting drug.
It is a centrally acting drug. It is an imidazoline receptor antagonist. So moxonidine. So whenever there is resistant hypertension, we can add this drug. It can be combined with the other drugs, but we have to be careful because of hypotension. Moxonidine.
Okay. Anil Birmani has asked a question. I think Altamas, you should answer this question.
Yes,
SGLT inhibitor is not antihypertensive, even though it has some pleiotropic effects. Whether it replaces RAS blocker is too much of a conjuncture.
Sure. So we agree with this. It's an anti-diabetic drug, as we just discussed, and we cannot even call it as anti-hypertensive at all.
Okay. If the hypertensive patient is not salt sensitive, still dietary restriction will help. Any one of you can answer.
Actually, salt sensitivity is a very difficult concept to explain. And still we don't have any data from India at least that what is the proportion of population who are salt sensitive or salt resistant. In the African Americans, at least they have said that 20%, 30% people have salt sensitivity, and they are one of the highest salt sensitivities in the world. In India, I think we have a variety of populations, variety of ethnic groups, and the salt sensitivity levels will be different across the groups. So we need to do some studies there to identify salt sensitivity pattern. And people with salt sensitivity, typically, if you reduce their salt intake, they tend to go into hypotension, or they are very easily controlled with other drugs. So I think we need to clearly identify, and only the clinical experience will tell us whether a person is salt sensitive or not.
Chandipan, I think you can take this question. Device therapies in hypertension. Would you like to take it, Chandipan? Device therapies.
As Dr. Rajiv Gupta said, now this is just one or two little bit promising trials are coming for denervation, because previous trials have failed actually. So the denervation went off actually from the scene. But recently, one or two trials have shown some benefit, and we have to wait for some more time to establish itself as a treatment of resistant hypertension.
Sir, any therapy you use for baroreceptor?
There are some there are some electrical stimulation for baroreceptors. These are all the extreme resistant hypertensions like denervation, baroreceptor sensitivity, and so on. So these are all very, very resistant hypertension, a very rare population. We don't use it routinely in any of our, they all remain as an experimental things tried for future very resistant hypertension and not used routinely.
Okay. In which situations, sir, you use nicardipine? Nicardipine?
We'll tell you tomorrow, sir.
Okay. Carvedilol is one of the best beta blocker along with vasodilator effects, yet not being optimally used. Why?
That's what the talk is about.
Yeah. Yes.
We have to use carvedilol. That's what the talk is about. We specifically said the coronary heart disease, you must select carvedilol first and so on. So with the hypertension coronary heart disease, the first drug will be carvedilol. Acute coronary syndrome, we said carvedilol is the best. The very fact we did this lecture is to remove that type of practice in our practitioners.
Sir, in anemia or hypercirculatory state, do you use antihypertensive? For example, if a person has got 160 by 60, do you use any drug to reduce the pressure?
I think we need to treat the primary cause first and then go from there, because if you have anemia, you give antihypertensive without controlling anemia.
Audio is not clear, sir.
Rajiv, you can talk little.
Yeah, I think we need to treat the cause, basic cause first of all, before we go into treatment of hypertension. Because if there's a mild hypertension, severe anemia, we need to treat the anemia first.
In the case of thyrotoxicosis,
severe anemia, first of all, we must rule out underlying any CKD. Anemia, that is very, very important.
In a situation, in a imaginary situation where there is 150 by, say, let us say 60 diastolic. Suppose if you give antihypertensive, the diastolic will go below 60. So is it advisable? It's just an imaginary question. Any one of you can answer because it was there in the. Any take on Chandipan about this?
Yes, sir. The first module, as far as the pathophysiology is concerned, we kept talking about the most dangerous pressure is the high systolic pressure and a low diastolic pressure. So it's the most dangerous pressure because high systolic pressure increases the demand of the heart and low diastolic pressure reduces the coronary supply to the heart. And it's also most difficult pressure to treat. And primarily it is due to increased aortic resistance. It is due to the loss of elasticity or the cushion function of the aorta. So when the cushion function is lost, the pulse wave velocity travels very fast to the periphery, and the reflected wave also comes in systole itself, adding on to the existing systolic pressure. Because of that, systolic pressure increases, and because the diastolic reflection has already come in systole itself, the diastolic pressure falls. So here the people have one study which has used is CAFE study. So here they have used the AC inhibitor plus a calcium channel blocker. In this type of patients who got a high, it actually translates into high central aortic pressure. So people have tried this combination, and this combination actually, when you reduce aortic resistance or you increase aortic elasticity, what actually happens is the systolic pressure may come down and the diastolic pressure actually will go up, because you make the reflected wave to come in diastole rather than systole itself, because of faster conduction of this pulse wave velocity in systole. So what you have to do is to reduce the resistance of the aorta to make the stiff aorta a little more pliable and compliant. Through this combination, they have shown good clinical benefit actually. It actually resulted in reduction of future clinical events. So these type of patients who carefully try the AC inhibitor, and the combination they tried there will be, there was perindopril and indapamide.
What is the ideal drug for isolated diastolic hypertension?
Isolated diastolic hypertension, primarily it is probably due to increase in peripheral resistance, where we have already told you that the peripheral resistance side, you have 3 or 4 drugs, the calcium channel blockers, angiotensin inhibitors, as well as the alpha blockers. So the ideal drug will be in a peripheral resistance, mean you have high diastolic pressure, means it's a function of afterload. So these are the vasodilators which should be tried in patients with isolated diastolic hypertension.
I think if there are more than 25 questions remaining. It's already 10:40. So we will wind up now. We'll ask everybody as usual. Rajiv Gupta, your message for the day. Short message. You unmute. Rajiv.
Yeah. My message is treat to target. I think that's a critical issue.
Thank you. Rajesh Shagar.
Sir, first we must diagnose high blood pressure, as Dr. Chennappan has pointed out. Appropriate combination is very, very important. Instead of pricing a single drug to have adverse effect, you please combine another drug. That is appropriate combination is very, very vital.
Dr. Altamas.
Sir, I couldn't get your question.
Oh, you have no question.
Carry home message. Carry home message.
Your message to,
Yeah, be very strong, hit early, hit hard in hypertension. Always ask for history of salty food intake, whether it is a cola, whether it is achar, papad, pickle, yams, whichever form, that is very important. Till those things are reduced, I think telling them to reduce the food in salt is not going to help. And always look for combination of drugs. That is the message from my side.
Okay, Altamas, because what we normally do, all the panelists who are joining today, we will be including you in our WhatsApp group, hypertension WhatsApp group. 3 WhatsApp groups are there. So I request you to join. I'll include you. Please answer a few questions in the WhatsApp. Rajiv Gupta sir, you also please join. I'll include you. So the questions which are unanswered, you can answer. Rashir, of course, will be there. Now, Chennappan, your last word from you.
See, when you are treating hypertension patients in your career or in your practice, daily you must see how many hypertension patients I have seen, in how many hypertension patients I have target blood pressure. So that's the most important. You introspect yourself. Whether you are seeing some 50 patients of hypertension, at least in 80% of them, you must try to get the target blood pressure, as Dr. Rajiv Gupta rightly said. But we have to introspect ourselves, whether we are seeing individual patient and say, okay, blood pressure is normal. But we must have a record to say, today I have seen 50 patients. In 40 patients, I was able to get the target blood pressure. So in that way, we can improve our practice of getting the target blood pressure in many of our patients. So many of the practitioners try to get majority of their hypertension patients to a target blood pressure. Definitely the morbidity and morbidity due to hypertension will tremendously come down.
Thank you, Chennappan. That was the message given by the JAMA also, yesterday article, which Rajshekhar and myself showed here. So don't be complacent and don't be low. Inertia should not be there, and we must treat aggressively and then make sure you get the target. And do counseling for everybody, because sometimes we check the pressure and ask them to come after 3 months, and we don't have follow-up, and follow-up and counseling is always necessary. Friends, tomorrow we are going to have another interesting session, acute severe hypertension. Rajiv Gupta is going to be there with us. Altumas, if you can join. Tomorrow is acute severe hypertension, 9 o'clock. And many have understood how to log in. But still, 30-40 people call me at 8:45, 8:50. Sir, how do I get the link? Though I have sent the link, and though we have got, Rajshekar has explained how to open the link, people have some difficulty. If you want any question, please ask me before 8 o'clock. When I'm in the webinar, so many people, including my good friend from Orissa, they call me, sir, very urgent, I want to listen. Then I have to go out of the webinar and then give them link. So please use the link. Tomorrow we already sent the link. The link is with you in the hypertension WhatsApp group. And those of you who want to join hypertension WhatsApp group, please contact me or Rajshekar. And tomorrow we'll meet at 9 o'clock, acute severe hypertension. Though we have put as 8:30, you can join at 8:45, 8:50, because we wanted to have 30 minutes for our preparation only. So 8:50, we can join. Rajiv Gupta sir, thank you very much for joining us. And we are really honored that your contribution to our webinar is very good. Altumas, tomorrow, if you can join. Rajshekar, thank you very much. Good night, Chanip, and thank you very much for the excellent
Good night,
talk.
sir.
Once again, bye. Good night. Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.